So I just thought I'd briefly run through what the Landmark Trust does, just in case you're not aware of what we're doing. Basically, we rescue smaller buildings, those ones that the National Trust and English Heritage don't want or can't cope with. We have about 240 buildings in our care now that we own or lease, and they're all quite small, but they're all significant buildings in terms of architectural or cultural significance. We basically rescue and restore them. If nobody else is going to support them, we jump in and rescue them. And the business model is to restore their historic character and make them into holiday accommodation for people to enjoy. So our main aims are to rescue and open small historic buildings for the enjoyment of the public. As I say, we've got 240 and they're all throughout the UK. We've got some on the Channel Islands, we've got 25 on Lundy, and we've also got 6 on Italy, in Italy, which is really because of our founder 60 years ago liked to collect places in Italy. And the business model, as I say, the lettings income, all the lettings income pays for the upkeep of the properties. And if they don't, then we have to delve into our coffers, which we try not to do. So that is the business model. I've been brought in to lead on the environmental sustainability strategy, which is 5 areas: energy and carbon management, climate adaptation, recycling and reuse, biodiversity, and sustainable travel. I've been here a year, just over a year now, and it's been deep diving into all the areas because I wasn't an expert to begin with, but I certainly learned a lot now. And thanks to Liz for that marvellous course. It was really, really helpful, lots of refreshing things, and I'm now doing my pledges. Yeah, we've got a 50-point plan that sits underneath these 5 areas. So I'm working my way through with all the teams at Landmark Trust. There's approximately 50 odd staff in the centre, and the regional teams. We have four people in each region, and the regions are divided into, the 6 regions in the UK. So there's not that, it's not a large staff, so the resources are limited, and I'm trying to cajole, persuade, influence people to pick up these areas of actions. And as I say, the 50-point plan sits below that. So I just wanted to talk a bit about, obviously, the climate adaptations. Everything is interlinked, and that's what I've learned through all of the courses I've been on. It's not just climate change, it's not just energy. Sorry, the parrot is screaming in the background, so apologies if it gets a bit noisy. Everything is interlinked. So we've already got a large programme of works that is there to improve all the properties, and including a big decarbonisation project where we've got the top 10 CO2e emitters, where we're replacing the boilers with renewables. We're doing a huge amount of insulating as we go around the properties, draft proofing. We've had a big project to put in chimney sheet with all the open unused chimneys, which is a considerable number. Trying to encourage our guests to use shutters more. We're thermal lining the curtains, another big project going around the country. Identifying where the location of the radiators and thinking about how the heat gets into the room and not putting curtains in front of them, putting in windowsills where we can to deflect the heat, possibly using radiator foil where it doesn't show unsightly. Interesting air tightness tests. I'm sure some of you have done this, where you put a big fan in one of the doors and you turn it on and block all of the open chimneys, and then take thermal imaging of where the drafts are happening. And it's fascinating to see how the air flows around these old buildings, looking at gaps in floors, floorboards, cornices, ceilings, where the walls are thinner and they're colder. All sorts of things you can learn from these thermal imaging. So we're going around the country doing air tightness tests. And we have a big programme of regular checks and maintenance that's ongoing. as well as the tree management. Most of our properties have got small gardens and some quite large landscapes, and we have to manage the trees as we go. So in terms of the specific climate change action plans, I've been asked to do a mapping of all of the landmark estate to identify those properties that are most vulnerable to climate risks, climate change risks, and then look at how we compile site-specific risk assessment and action plans. So I just wanted to show you my spreadsheet, because that's really a working spreadsheet. Oh, beg your pardon, go back. Let me just share my screen. Oh dear, how am I going to do this? Being a bit slow to respond at the moment. Here we go. Okay, I've got a climate risk log. Can you all see that?
Yes.
So this is a list of all of our 250 buildings. The only way I can keep the data is to get spreadsheets going. So I'm a bit of a queen of spreadsheets nowadays. I have spreadsheets for everything. This one identifies, trying to identify the priorities for looking at what we do in terms of apportioning our time, resources and funds. We started off by, if you look at the grey, obviously the column B is the list of all the properties. The areas in grey, we started off by talking to our insurance company and or our provider, and they provided the total sum insured, which gives us a bit of a starting point. We then worked out what our average loss of income potential per day would be based on the average person per night, how many the property slept, and factoring in the percentage occupancy rate over the last 4 full years, excluding the COVID years. So again, it all helps to understand where our priorities could lie going forward. Moving over, the next step was to factor in any lease expiry dates. We've got 50 properties that we lease, and I think 10 of them are coming up for renewals in the next 6 or 7 years. So we've got a lot of them are over 100 years, so they're not a decision to be factored in there at the moment. But there's a thought process that if the financial burden gets too much, we do have an option to not renew the lease. Obviously, we don't want to, because we want to look after these buildings for the longevity. So that would be, but it's still a factor. Listed buildings, scheduled ancient monuments. Again, if we need to prioritise anything, we've got the data here. The next thing we did is talk to our insurance about a risk rating to see if they had any starting point. They did a screening for all of our properties where they have all sorts of things, and they call it natural catastrophe screening, where they plug in each property's latitude and longitude, and they come up with a rating. It's a very broad brush approach. It's not based on the actual plot of the land or the any landscaping or any understanding of the property, but it was quite a helpful starting point to see what they came up with. If I just select their extreme, their top 5 extreme risks didn't correlate to our risk categories. If you see the coloured column in column O, I'll come on to that in a second, but it was just a really helpful starting point to see what they came up with. The next stage was to talk to all of our surveyors. We've got a surveyor in each region, and I went around talking to them all about what their understanding was of the property. And like Rob mentioned just a minute ago, in terms of understanding the character on the ground, obviously Marsh could not, the insurance could not factor in that knowledge because they didn't have it. So we were talking to surveyors about the landscaping, the condition of the property, the maintenance program, their understanding of the prevailing winds, how they saw the risks, the floodplains, what had happened in the past, and they came up with what their thought of was the main hazard. So we gave them the option of storms, flood, storm and flood, trees, erosion, subsidence, water ingress, and heat, or indeed whether there was no main hazard that they perceived. So this list was quite a helpful starting point in column M to get their understanding of what the main hazard was. And also the reason that they gave. I was just trying to capture, it's a very hard, again, it's a starting point, but this is the start of the process. Why, for example, I mean, Fort Clonk comes out high on everybody's rating because it's right in the middle of the sea and it's frequently battered by storms. So we were trying to build up an understanding of the on the ground risk areas. The next few columns, we looked at whether it was actually a risk to the fabric itself, the building, whether it was more of a risk to the access, the power, the services, and that would relate back to the financial risk in terms of the visitors and the business. I also wanted to try and capture their thoughts on biodiversity. Now, surveyors haven't traditionally in our organisation looked at that area, so it was just, that's not quite finished there. And to capture which were near the coast, because the coastal properties in everybody's books are the highest risk properties. So in column O, we came up with again, it was surveyors' preliminary capture of what their main risk was, which was the main risks. And we came up with a list of 6 or 7 high risk properties. And so this is where we've got to really. The next stage, as you see, I also factored in the National Trust. This was a while ago, actually, when they presented their the mapping that they'd done, hazard map. So I started to plot where our properties were on their hazard map. It took me a long time because I'm not particularly good at mapping, and it was quite a high level map. So delving down, it took quite a long time. But it's a starting point. But interestingly, their high risk areas didn't really correlate to our high risk properties. But for all sorts of reasons, that's not surprising because they were looking at the areas of the country that were at risk of weather and didn't factor in, like the insurance couldn't factor in, our knowledge on the ground of the properties and the landscaping. So after all that, we started to talk about mitigations and what kind of things we could do. This just captures the quick wins and what ongoing mitigation strategies are being planned in. So, as I said previously, there's lots of checks. We have a team of 4 in each region going around the properties. They're meant to be the properties 4 times a year each. So out of those 16 visits, we have a checklist that they can all use to identify or look at issues or aspects of the property, just to see if they can report back to the surveyors as to anything going wrong. For example, roof slates, downpipes leaking, the cracks in the walls. There's a long list, as I'm sure you all know, about what kind of things they're looking for. So things that we thought are quick wins, floodboards that we could put in doorways in certain areas, and train our housekeepers to go over and put them in. It all depends on the listed building consent, obviously, because most of our properties are listed. So whether we can do this or not, it remains to be seen. Looking at external shutters, we do have a lot of properties with already external shutters, Fort Clonk being one, but the stones that were thrown up at them, as I say, look at this line 6, rocks have been thrown against the building in storms over the years, and a couple of shutters haven't withstood that, so we could put in stronger shutters potentially. And monitoring trees. The trees is a big risk for us. We have a lot of trees. We don't want to chop them all down. We're trying to preserve them as much as we can, but we do have a rolling program of looking at how we manage those trees, doing a bit of tree surgery where we need to, looking at prevailing winds and the height of the trees to see if there was a storm, which way is it likely to come, and what's the likely fall of the tree. And we don't want them to fall on the properties. We did have one recently, and we don't want to go through that again. So so that's really, I haven't been looking at my notes at all. So I don't think I've missed too many things. Oh yes, I just wanted to show you our risk matrix. So along the tab at the bottom, this is a working spreadsheet. This is what I'm trying to encourage all the regional teams to keep filling in, the surveyors particularly, but also the operations teams in terms of list of storms. You can see no one's filled it in since November, and there's been an awful lot of storms since then. We're trying to capture the specific damage from specific storms, and as we go through time, are they looking more frequent? Where are they becoming more frequent? And again, it all builds up the picture of our knowledge of the properties, and so we can factor it into the risk matrix. So the next step that I'm working on with our surveyors and teams is to come up with the top 10 high risk properties that we then want to do full risk assessments for, using this risk matrix. And I've adapted our health and safety one to see if we can actually make it more relevant for focusing on the buildings degradation rather than the biodiversity area, and asking our teams to fill them in or choose where their property falls on this risk matrix, so that we can see again where the high risk issues are. And these are some descriptions to help the surveyors decide where their property falls. So I'll go back to my slides. I've just got a couple more to finish with. I just want to tell you, oh, sorry. As a quick example, Saddle Castle on Kintyre, west coast of Scotland, we've got a major refurbishment programme starting in the end of February. You can see the location where it's actually facing Scotland. So you can see the mainland over here. So it's facing east, where the prevailing winds tend to come from. So we do have an awful lot of battering and flooding, and it's pretty much on the beach. So we're looking to reorganise the rooms inside the property because of this increased water ingress and damp. We were going to put the fabulous new kitchen, because it's only got a tiny kitchen at the moment, in this large, I'm going to move that picture down here, the large cellar on the ground floor that you can see in the plan here. It's a lovely vaulted cellar. We make a fabulous kitchen, but we thought, actually, no, we can't afford to do that with climate change coming in. So we now decided to move it up into the dining room on the first floor to protect it for the future, and move the dining room into the sitting room, and then move the sitting room into the one of the second floor bedrooms, which is a fabulous oak panelled room. And because we want to keep the number of bedrooms the same, we're looking at redoing the roof, insulating the attic, and putting a new bedroom and bathroom up there. So it's a major programme. It's going to take a year to do, and it needs to be done anyway. But we've made some significant changes because of the climate change risk there. And another project we're doing at Carverley, interestingly, I just heard the other day, we put in a ground source heat pump, or I think 2 or 3 ground source heat pumps at Carverley. And we haven't been able to get enough electricity from the local provider. So we've had to put in extra cables and things, £100,000 worth of cables to get electricity from a neighbouring supply. And I thought that was a really interesting example of the national grid not necessarily being able to support all of these renewable heat pumps going forward. So it was a bit of a wake-up call, really. So that was really it about what we're doing. And I'd love anyone to jump in about any emissions that they can see we haven't done. I can factor in, or any questions that you might have. I'll stop sharing my screen.